What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another video, and in this video I'm doing something that I think we did a little bit before, but also I'm going to kind of expand on that, and that is looking at the Detroit Lions big board for the draft. Now, I want to have a big board made so that when the draft starts, we have a big board to look at, like our own personal big board, and not just the NFL's, but our own personal one for each round, and I think that would be super fun. So what you're seeing here is my first 3 rounds big board. Now, I want to do one that's voted by you guys, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that. I'm thinking if I put up, because I only can put up 5 options at once in the voting thing, so I'm really trying to figure out how to do it. So I think follow me on Instagram would be the first thing you should do. Follow DoseOfDion 2.0, because maybe we can do it over there and be a lot easier. But the thought is that you guys vote on one, and we'll have a whole big board. Now, I only did the first 3 rounds here, but I thought it would be something a little bit different to mix it up. So basically, as you guys can see, the first 3 rounds, and you're probably wondering how I picked these players. Well, I used one site because I thought it was only fair. So Tankathon, they put out their top 100 prospects. So I thought the only way to keep it fair and keep within, the right players, because we don't know who's going to be drafted where. If we did, that'd be a lot easier, but we don't know that. So I think the best would make it fair was sticking to one website and just like going with it. And Tankathon has a pretty nice, they do a lot of different things that I've been looking at, so I'm just going to use them. So basically, I used Tankathon, and I looked at their top 100 prospects. So all the way up to 32, I took all of those prospects from 1 to 32 in their rankings, and I was able to put those into a top 10 to make my first round pick, because potentially we trade back, and then some of these players are more valuable, which I will get into as we start naming through the players. Same thing with the second round. I started at 33, and I went down to, I believe it was 64, and then for the third round, I went 64 and on. So that's how I did this, and that's why the players fall in here. So if you're seeing a guy and you're like, well, that's really a stretch, or that's he won't fall that far or something, that's just how I did it, because that's the only fair way to do it, I think, because there is no 100% way to tell for sure. Now, I also didn't just put the 10 best players on here. So I didn't just go through and put, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and put them all in here. No, these are rankings based on our needs, not the entire NFL. So it's specific to the Detroit Lions. And basically, like I said, I want to have them for when the draft starts, that we can just look at it and, cross them off as we continue to go throughout the draft and be like, okay, this is who we're looking at. This is who's available out of the players that have been selected already. All right, so let's just get this thing started. So I'll explain it as we go. Hopefully I can keep it simple. So the first player, obviously, on the big board, coming in the first round, let's look at our first round first. Our first round of the big board, we have Chase Young. So Chase Young, this is not a guy that I think we could potentially trade back and still get. Hold up, my mouth is dry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, dog. My mouth was dry. Okay, so Chase Young's here. This is not a guy we could trade back and possibly get, but in the first round, potentially he falls to number 3. I know it's very, very risky, and it may not happen. Not risky necessarily, but very unlikely. But if it did, I would love it, and Chase Young's first for me. It's been like that since really the season, and if he falls to our spot, I had to take him. I'm taking him at number 3. Next up is Isaiah Simmons. So, again, Isaiah Simmons, some people could say, well, you could trade back and get him. He doesn't have to be picked at 3rd. Well, for me, he's my second favorite prospect for the Lions in the first round. Just very simple like that. Okay, other than Chase Young, if Chase Young most likely isn't there, Isaiah Simmons is my guy. Next up, Derrick Brown. Now, Derrick Brown is above Jeffrey Okudah. I understand that's probably confusing some people. But, again, it's not by necessarily who I think is going to go so high. It's the players that I think would fit the Lions really well. And for me, Derrick Brown has been something I've been really looking at for the Lions. Derrick Brown, defensive tackle, is the biggest need. I've talked about it into this entire offseason. Now, I think we should go in free agency and grab a really good defensive tackle. Whether we do or we don't, I still think Derrick Brown will be a really nice help. I mean, if we grabbed a defensive tackle in free agency that's really good and then added him with Derrick Brown, wow, we'd be special. But at the same time, with the defense we run, if we're in a 3-4, it doesn't really matter. So maybe you just grab one, though. It really depends on what happens in free agency for a lot of these guys. We understand that. So, just it is what it is. Next up is Jeffrey Okudah. Now, Jeff Okudah is really going to come down to what happens with Darius Slay, and that really depends on how far down he'll move. Right now, I'm at 4, and I think 4 is pretty much a middle ground for me. If Slay's gone, he could potentially bump up to at least 3. He's going to at least go up to 3, maybe even 2. If Slay's still there, I think 4 is a solid place to put him. I mean, I would still not be Superman with Okudah, but that means we have to focus on front 7 defensively in free agency. And then as I've talked about, if you guys really want to know what my Lions strategy is, you guys can check that video out. I put it up yesterday, and I basically break down how I think things should go. Next up is Javon Kinlaw. Like I said, not all of these guys are at the 3rd spot. So Javon Kinlaw, we don't probably have to take it at 3rd. This is a guy we could potentially trade back and take, maybe if we trade back with the Dolphins or somebody. So Javon Kinlaw comes in number 5. He's my 5th favorite out of the first round rankings player that I think we should draft. I would love to have Javon Kinlaw on Lions. I necessarily don't think it's necessary for us to go get a guy like Andrew Thomas or Tristan Wirfs or those kind of players. I would rather have a guy that's immediate impact that fills a big need, and I think Kinlaw does that. Next up, AJ Epinesa, getting an edge rusher out of Iowa. Again, this is a good trade back scenario. Next up, Tua. Yes, I did not put his last name. I had his last name because I had to look up how to spell it, and then I deleted it to move stuff around, and I just decided not to look it up again. I don't know why. I'm lazy. I'm sorry, y'all. But it just says Tua. You know who I'm talking about. Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback. Now, you're probably thinking maybe he's a little bit high for me. I think Tua for me personally isn't that high. I know for some people it's higher, and it's not saying that I would trade back to 17 and we could take Tua, because that's not likely. You're taking Tua at 3. If you're taking Tua, you're taking him at 3. So the fact that I put him on here is kind of a good thing, because it's like, hey, I'm putting him on there. He's at 7. He's obviously not the guy I would take at 3, because I think there's immediate impact players, but he's still on there. So I guess it's just a little bit for you guys. And also, when you guys do yours, he could potentially be at like 1 or 2. I mean, it really depends on what you guys vote on. Next up is Kenneth Murray. Now, Kenneth Murray is a linebacker. And maybe the top linebacker coming out of this draft, maybe the top inside linebacker, other than Isaiah Simmons. Yeah, probably. And this would be a really far trade back scenario, maybe. I don't think you'd want to take this guy anywhere near the top 10. Maybe he'd probably fall to the 20s. He could potentially fall to the second round. I think late 20s, maybe the beginning of the 30s. Maybe the Packers get him. I can really see the Saints picking him up. Next up, Yetur Gross-Matos. Again, this could be a second round pick, but according to the rankings, he was in the first 32. And Gross-Matos would be a nice edge for us. Good trade back scenario. And Kayvon Chasen, again, not my favorite one. That's why he comes in number 10. But he is a solid edge. And again, you could trade a lot back. You could trade. This would be really trading far back. And you still do get a solid need in return. You are getting an edge rusher. But obviously, like I've stated, that's not my favorite need. My biggest need for the Lions is offensive line and defensive line. So there's Kayvon. All right, next up is second round. So here in the second round, like I said, I went from 32 all the way to 64. So at the first, at the big board, in the second round big board. So I try to break this up into sections, if you guys can tell. I didn't try to string it all together. I try to really break it up into players that are going to be taken, because it's not like there's no one going to be taking. So that's why I had to try to keep it like this. I can't just name all 32 players. And then I was like, what the heck is the point of that? So second round, Tyler Biadasz, and I think he'd definitely fall to our spot. Now, he was a center in college, but they believe that he has the arm length and the ability to move positions to guard. And if he can, that'd be awesome. That would remind me a little bit of Graham Glasgow, who went from center to guard. Tyler, to me, is a day one starter. I think he can come in and start. And for the second round, I would absolutely love him. That's why he comes in number 1, okay? So that's not me saying I'm going to take him in the first round. I would not take him in the first round. But second round-wise, our second round pick, wherever that is, if he's there, that'd be my favorite guy. Now, Jonathan Taylor. Okay, I get it. He's a little high. Okay, I know he's a little high. But come on, man. It's Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is my favorite running back in the draft. I think he's the best running back in the draft. And honestly, if we go get Jonathan Taylor, I wouldn't be mad if we traded away Kerryon. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to go out there and say it. I know. Next up, at number 3, I have Patrick Queen. Now, Patrick Queen is looking like he's going to go in the first round. But, like I said, according to the rankings, he was a second-round player. And kind of similar to Kenneth Murray, he fills out an interior linebacker position. And this is a guy that could replace Jared Davis, as well as Kenneth Murray, who could be a replacement of Jared Davis. And I think getting a linebacker in the second round makes more sense to me than in the first round. I'm just going to say that. Next up at number 4, we have Raekwon Davis, defensive lineman. I would love to get Raekwon Davis, can play the interior defensive lineman spot, and that's a huge need for me, like I've said. And I think we need to get 2 defensive tackles this offseason. I think you either have to get 1 in free agency, 1 in the draft. You have to get 2 in the draft, something like that. You got to find a way to get 2, not just 1. And I think the 2 guys that you could go get, maybe a free agent, you get Raekwon Davis to pair him with it. I would love that. That'd be amazing. Next up is Josh Jones, the offensive tackle. And this is the first offensive tackle on here, but I think this is a potential replacement for Rick Wagner. Now, someone said in my last video, I can't remember. I think who was his name? I can picture. I know who he is. I just can't think of his name. The Real something. He used to be called the Real. So you know who you are. Basically, you said, hey, the thing is, no one's going to trade for Rick Wagner. And you may be right about that. But, assuming, let's be happy here. Okay, let's think positive thoughts. We can give Rick Wagner away for a 7th round pick. Okay, whatever. Then we can replace him with Josh Jones. Next up at number 6, we have Neville Gallimore. Now, Gallimore's a little bit further, but some of these other guys I really felt like I had to put above him. He is a defensive tackle as well. Fills out a really big need. That's the main reason he's on there. Next up at number 7, I have Curtis Weaver. So Curtis Weaver fell a little bit for the edge rusher position, but like I said, it's not my biggest need, so that's why. That's why ours is going to differ. If you think edge rushers are our biggest need, then I think yours is going to differ a lot, because you probably would have Curtis Weaver way at the top. For me personally, it's offensive line, defensive line, not necessarily edge rusher. I'm talking interior defensive line first. That's why a lot of these guys are ahead, and I know there's some running backs on here. Okay, I get it. I'm sorry. And when we play the weird defense that we do, when we come out in a 3-4 type of defense, we need 2 middle linebackers. A big linebacker would help. You know, Patrick Queen would be nice. Getting a guy to replace Jared Davis, okay? Next up is J.K. Dobbins, the running back of Ohio State. J.K. Dobbins is that dude, my second favorite running back behind only Jonathan Taylor. And again, I think he could replace Kerryon Johnson. Next up, Zach Bond. He is the outside linebacker for Wisconsin, and he's more of an edge rusher. Again, we could use an edge rusher, don't get me wrong. Not my biggest need, but he is very talented. He comes in at 9. And finally, coming in at number 10, we have Solomon Kinley here, who's an offensive lineman. And again, same needs, right? Offensive guard, I think he could play there. So yeah, he comes in at number 10. And he played against a lot of competition. I believe he went to Georgia, so he comes in at number 10. Now, into the third round. These are my third round. This is my third round big board where we have Josh Uche coming in number 1. And Josh Uche is just rising up the draft stock. I mean, some people are now saying second round. At first, I was thinking like 4th or 5th round. This dude's flying up the board because of the Senior Bowl. But if he falls to the third and he's there, and you know, in the first 2 rounds we get the guard, we get the trenches, defensive line, offensive line. I'm good with that. This I think is a perfect spot to go get your edge rusher because I think Josh Uche is a heck of a player, and in the third round you are getting a beast there. The numbers and production is there. Next up, Malik Harrison, another linebacker, as well as Troy Dye. You're getting 2 linebackers here, and again, the defense that we play, linebackers are so important, and I like both of these guys. And once you get to the third round of things, I think that's where you're getting, you know, more pieces for Matt Patricia to play around with, and that's why they come in there. Next up is Trey Adams, offensive tackle. Again, potentially a Rick Wagner replacement, or maybe a guy that could sit behind him. I know it's stressful, but maybe he could sit behind him for a year and learn a little bit if he's not completely ready to go. Next up is Jonathan Greenyard, edge rusher out of Florida. Similar reason, edge rusher. I think this is a really good time to get edge rusher. Third round is looking good for me. I'm thinking first, second round, like I said, trenches. Third round, it looks really good for an edge rusher for me. I'm just saying. Or even a cornerback. I'll see that in a second. Next up, Rashard Lawrence. Now, this is the one guy that's not an edge rusher on this whole thing. Rashard Lawrence is a defensive tackle, but he was really good. I really like what I saw of him when I was watching LSU play, and I think Rashard Lawrence would be really nice. I think he could be a second-round pick. I really do think this is kind of a sleeper defensive tackle. Next up is Ben Bredeson. Now, this may be a reach to you guys. Some people are like, wow, Ben Bredeson, are you kidding me? But, hey, you know what? If he is his third-round pick, I would like him because he would fill in that guard position, but at the same time, I think it is a little bit of a stretch too. That's why he's coming in so low. Next up is Damon Arnett. Now here's the cornerback of Ohio State. I think he's higher, you know, because that's the thing. The draft board isn't necessarily how high you're going to go in a draft. Let me just explain it really briefly, because I think Damon Arnett's going to go above Ben Bredeson, Rashard Lawrence, Greenyard, Adams, a lot of these guys, but he's not that high on my list. You know what I mean? Like my big board for the Lions, just like the first round. You know, I think someone like Tua. Okay, AJ Epinesa isn't going before Tua, but for me, I would, you know, AJ Epinesa would be higher, but that's still a trade back situation. I know it's confusing. Hopefully you're understanding what I'm saying. I know it's confusing. Next up is Damon Arnett. Like I said, though, I think he's a really good cornerback, and he's one of the best players in the third round, and this would be a good time. This would be a solid time to take a quarterback. I know I don't think it's our biggest need, but Arnett's really talented, and he fell to the third. I would have no problem doing it. Next up is Jacob Phillips, the linebacker. Again, linebacker, you can't go wrong with him in our defense. And finally, Michael Pittman. Okay, I threw in a wild card here. I threw in the wide receiver here. Yes, maybe a little bit stretch. I really like what Pittman was doing. The production is definitely there. I think it was over 1,200 yards receiving. I know, it's my only wide receiver. It's like my really only skill position on the draft, so I had to do it. So he comes in at number 10 in the third round. So that's my 3-round big board for the Detroit Lions. I know it's confusing. If you guys want to make your own, please do so. I really want to do one where you guys vote on one and we make one that way. I just don't know how to do that. If you guys have any ideas, let me know. Yeah. I'm out.